Hello, my name is Sarah, and I need you to listen to my story. Please stay with me until the end, and if stories like this touch your heart, subscribe to this channel because there are many more powerful tales coming your way. What I'm about to share changed everything I thought I knew about my family, about trust, and about the small objects that can hold the biggest secrets. It all started with a Rubik's Cube, that colourful, innocent puzzle that my grandfather kept on his desk for 40 years. I never imagined that those 6 sides, those endless combinations, would become the key to unravelling the greatest mystery of my life. But before I tell you about the cube, I need to tell you about my grandfather, about my family, and about the day everything fell apart. My grandfather, Thomas, was a mathematics professor, a brilliant, quiet man who spoke more through puzzles and problems than through words. He emigrated to America from Hungary in 1978, carrying almost nothing except his mind and a small wooden box. Inside that box was the original Rubik's Cube, one of the first ever made, given to him personally by Rubik himself. Also, he always told us, I grew up in my grandfather's house. My mother died when I was 7, and my father, consumed by grief, slowly faded from our lives, leaving me in the care of Thomas. He raised me with patience, teaching me to see the world as a series of patterns waiting to be solved. Every night he would sit at his desk, turning that cube in his weathered hands, the clicking sounds becoming the lullaby of my childhood. Sarah, he would say, life is like this cube. Sometimes everything seems chaotic, all the colors mixed up. But there's always a solution. You just need to find the right sequence of moves. I believed him. I believed everything he said. Thomas was my hero, my teacher, my father figure. He was the one constant in a world that had taken so much from me. When I was 16, he taught me to solve the cube myself. It took me 3 months, but the day I finally did it, seeing all those colors align perfectly, I cried. Not because of the cube, but because I had made him proud. Years passed. I went to college, studied mathematics like him, became a teacher. I visited him every weekend, and we would sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about numbers and theories. The cube was always there, always on his desk, like a talisman protecting our little world. Then came the phone call that shattered everything. I was 32 years old when my grandfather died. A heart attack, sudden and merciless. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. The grief was overwhelming, but I had to be strong. I was his only family, the one responsible for handling his affairs, sorting through his belongings, closing the chapter of his life. His house felt empty without him. Every room echoed with his absence. I started going through his things slowly, carefully, not ready to let go. His books, his papers, his mathematical journals. Everything was meticulously organized, just as he had been in life. But when I reached his desk, when I picked up that Rubik's Cube, something felt different. It was heavier than I remembered. I turned it in my hands, confused. Had it always been this heavy? I twisted the sides, and that's when I heard it. A rattle. Something was inside. My heart began to race. In all those years, through all those thousands of turns, I had never heard that sound before. My hands were shaking as I examined the cube more carefully. And then I saw it. A tiny seam, almost invisible, running along one edge. This wasn't just a Rubik's Cube, it was a container. A hiding place. It took me an hour to figure out how to open it. There was a specific sequence of moves, a combination that unlocked a hidden mechanism. When it finally clicked open, my breath caught in my throat. Inside was a small USB drive, wrapped in a piece of yellowed paper. The paper was a note, written in my grandfather's careful handwriting. For Sarah, the truth about who I really am. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. Forgive me. My hands wouldn't stop trembling as I rushed to find my laptop. What truth? What was he apologizing for? Thomas had been the most honest, straightforward person I had ever known. What could he possibly have hidden from me? I plugged in the USB drive. There were folders, dozens of them, documents, photographs, letters. I clicked on the first folder labeled Budapest 1956. What I found made my blood run cold. My grandfather wasn't just a mathematics professor. He was a spy. The documents were meticulous. Reports, coded messages, photographs of people and places I didn't recognize. But as I read deeper, the picture became clear. During the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, Thomas had been recruited by Western intelligence. He was 24 years old, a brilliant young mathematician, and he used his academic connections to pass information about Soviet movements, about the brutal suppression of the uprising. He wasn't Thomas Kovacs, the simple professor. He was Agent Rubik, named after the puzzle master himself, because of his ability to solve complex problems and decode Soviet communications. I felt like I was reading about a stranger. This couldn't be the gentleman who had raised me, who had taught me to solve puzzles, who had never raised his voice. But the evidence was overwhelming. Photograph after photograph showed him meeting with handlers, passing documents, living a double life. But that wasn't the worst of it. As I dug deeper into the files, I found something that made my stomach turn. A mission report from 1977. Operation Exodus. My grandfather had been tasked with smuggling information out of Hungary hidden in various objects, mathematical instruments, books and toys, puzzles, the Rubik's Cube. I clicked on a file labeled Personal Complications. It was a journal entry, written in English, dated March 1978. Today I betrayed the only woman I ever loved. Irina discovered what I was doing. She found the documents in our apartment. I thought I had been so careful, but love makes you careless. She said she would report me to the authorities unless I stopped. I couldn't stop. Too many lives depended on the information I was carrying. Too many people were counting on me to get them out. So I did the unthinkable. I reported her first. I told my handlers that she was a Soviet informant, that she was compromising our operations. It was a lie. She was innocent. She was just a woman who loved me and wanted me to be safe. They took her away, I don't know where. I was evacuated to America 2 weeks later. I've carried this guilt ever since. I'm a traitor. Not to my country, but to my heart. I stopped reading. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe. Irina, that name. I had heard it before. My grandfather used to whisper it in his sleep sometimes, during the last years of his life, when his mind started to wander. I had always thought it was just a dream, a fragment of his past. But she was real, and he had destroyed her. But the revelations didn't stop there. I found another folder. Family. Inside were photographs I had never seen. My grandmother, who had supposedly died before I was born. Except these photos showed her alive, in America, in the 1980s, and she wasn't alone. There was a little boy with her. Dark hair, brown eyes. He looked about 5 years old. On the back of one photo, in my grandfather's handwriting, Elena and Michael, 1985. They're better off without me, Elena. My grandmother's name was Elena. And Michael. Who was Michael? I frantically searched through more files. Birth certificates, adoption papers, and then the truth hit me like a physical blow. My father had a brother. An older brother who had been given up for adoption when my father was just a baby. Thomas had another son, and he had abandoned him, given him away because he couldn't handle the pressure of his double life, because he was broken by what he had done to Irina. My uncle had an uncle I'd never known existed. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. Thomas wasn't the hero I had imagined. He was a man who had made terrible choices, who had destroyed lives, who had kept secrets that had poisoned our family for generations. But there was more. There was always more. In the final folder, labeled Sarah, I found documents about my mother's death. The official story had always been a car accident, random, tragic, but these documents told a different story. My mother had been investigating Thomas. She had found some of his old contacts, people from his spy days, and she had started asking questions. She wanted to know who her father really was. Somewhere had decided that she was getting too close to secrets that needed to stay buried. The documents didn't say it explicitly, but the implication was clear. My mother's death hadn't been an accident. It had been a message, a warning, and my grandfather had known. He had suspected. But he had said nothing, done nothing, because he was terrified that if he pursued it, I would be next. I sat in that empty house, surrounded by my grandfather's things, and I wept. For my mother, for the grandmother I never knew, for the uncle who had been erased from our family, for Irina, whoever she was, wherever she ended up, and yes, even for Thomas, the broken man who had tried to protect me by hiding the truth. But I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't let these secrets stay buried. I had to find the truth, all of it. The first person I looked for was Michael, my uncle. The adoption papers had names, dates, locations. It took me 3 weeks working with a private investigator, but we found him, Michael Brennan. He was 57 years old, living in Boston, working as an architect. He had no idea Thomas was his biological father. He had been adopted by a loving family, had lived a good life. But there was always a hole in his heart where his origin story should have been. I called him. The conversation was one of the hardest things I've ever done. How do you tell someone that their entire understanding of their past is wrong? But Michael deserved the truth. We all did. We met a month later in a coffee shop halfway between our cities. I brought the USB drive, the photographs, everything. He looked at the pictures of Elena, his biological mother, with tears streaming down his face. I always wondered, he said quietly. I always felt like there was something missing. Now I know, but Michael wasn't angry. He was grateful. You gave me my history, he said. That's a gift, even if it's painful. Together we decided to find out what had happened to Irina. It seemed impossible, a woman who had disappeared in Soviet Hungary over 40 years ago, but Thomas had been meticulous. He had kept records, names, locations, and in the age of the internet, with the opening of Soviet archives, some things that had been hidden were finally coming to light. It took 6 months, but we found her. Or rather, we found her daughter. Irina had been imprisoned for 2 years on false charges of espionage. When she was released, she was broken, unable to trust anyone. She never married, but she had a daughter from a previous relationship. That daughter, Katalin, was now 60 years old, living in Budapest, working as a historian. I sent her an email. I told her everything. About Thomas, about what he had done, about the guilt he had carried. I didn't know if she would respond. I didn't know if she would even believe me. She responded the next day. My mother spoke about Thomas until the day she died. She never stopped loving him, even after what he did. She always said that war makes monsters of good men. She forgave him. I think it's time we all did. Katalin shared photographs of Irina, a beautiful woman with sad eyes, holding a baby Katalin herself. There were letters too, letters Irina had written but never sent, addressed to Thomas, telling him about her life, about their daughter, about the forgiveness she wanted to offer, but never could. We arranged to meet. Michael, Katalin, and I. 3 people connected by Thomas. By his choices, by the secrets he had kept. We met in Budapest, in the city where it had all begun. Standing in that city, walking the streets where my grandfather had once been a young spy, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. But I also felt something else. Hope. The possibility of healing. We visited the places Thomas had mentioned in his documents, the university where he had taught, the apartment building where he had lived with Irina, the bridge where he had made his final dead drop before fleeing to America. And finally, we went to a small park where, according to Irina's letters, they used to meet in secret. There, under a tree that had witnessed decades of history, the 3 of us sat together. We shared our stories, our pain, our questions. And slowly, piece by piece, we began to reconstruct the family that Thomas's secrets had torn apart. Michael pulled out a Rubik's Cube. He had learned to solve it after we met as a way to connect with the grandfather he had never known. He twisted the sides, mixing up the colors. "Life really is like this," he said, echoing Thomas's old words, "all mixed up. But there's always a solution." He handed it to me. I took it, feeling the familiar weight in my hands. And I began to solve it, moving through the algorithms my grandfather had taught me, finding the patterns in the chaos. As the colors began to align, I thought about Thomas, about Irina, about Elena and Michael and my mother, about all the choices that had been made, all the lives that had been affected. I thought about how one man's decisions had rippled out through generations, creating pain but also, ultimately, bringing us together. When I finished, all 6 sides were complete, perfect, whole. "There," I said quietly. "A solution." Catalin smiled. "My mother used to say that forgiveness is the only way to solve the impossible puzzle." Maybe she was right. We made a decision that day. We would tell our story. Not to expose Thomas, not to condemn him, but to show that even the darkest secrets can be brought into the light. That families broken by lies can be rebuilt through truth. That the complicated, messy, painful reality of human choices is always better than the comfort of ignorance. I returned to America with a new family. Michael and I talked every week. Catalin came to visit, and we showed her the life Thomas had built in America, the legacy he had left behind. We gave her his papers, his journals, his story. She was writing a book about the Hungarian Revolution and Thomas's experiences. For better or worse, we're part of that history. And the Rubik's Cube? I keep it on my desk now, just as Thomas did, but I don't hide anything inside it. The time for secrets is over. Sometimes I turn it in my hands and think about my grandfather. Was he a hero or a villain? A spy or a traitor? A loving father or a man who destroyed everyone he touched? The truth is, he was all of those things. He was human, complicated, flawed. He made terrible choices that hurt people, but he also tried in his own broken way to protect the ones he loved. I forgave him. It took time, but I did. Because holding on to anger, onto betrayal, is like holding onto a scrambled Rubik's Cube and refusing to solve it. You can clutch it tightly, feeling the sharp edges cut into your palm. Or you can start making moves, turning the pieces, looking for the pattern that will make everything whole again. The past doesn't change. Irina still suffered. Elena still left. Michael still grew up without his father. My mother still died. Those facts remain, immutable as mathematics. But what we do with those facts, how we move forward, how we choose to honor the memory of those who came before us, that's where we find our solution. I teach mathematics now, like Thomas did. And I teach my students about puzzles, about patterns, about the beauty of finding order in chaos. But I also teach them something Thomas learned too late, that honesty is more important than perfection. That a family built on truth, even painful truth, is stronger than one built on comfortable lies. My grandfather used to say that the Rubik's Cube has 43 quintillion possible combinations, but only one solution. He was wrong. There are many ways to solve a cube. Many sequences of moves that lead to the same end. And there are many ways to solve a family, to heal the wounds of the past, to move forward together. This is my story. The story of how a puzzle revealed secrets, how secrets revealed truth, and how truth, painful as it was, set us free. If you've listened this far, thank you. If you've experienced betrayal in your own family, if you've discovered secrets that changed everything you thought you knew, I want you to know you're not alone. The path to healing is long, but it exists. You just have to be brave enough to start turning the pieces. Subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine. Stories of families torn apart and rebuilt. Stories of secrets and truth. Stories of people finding their way through the impossible puzzle of human relationships. Because that's what we all are, really. complex combinations of choices and circumstances, trying to find our way back to wholeness. My name is Sarah, and this is how I learned that even the smallest objects can contain the biggest truths. That even the most broken families can find a way to heal. And that sometimes the only way to solve the puzzle is to stop hiding and start seeking the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe because there are so many more stories to tell. And each one reminds us that we're all trying to solve the same impossible puzzle: how to be human, how to love, how to forgive, and how to find the pattern that makes us whole.